This episode of The Incubator is proudly sponsored by Chiesi. Providing innovative neonatology solutions for more than 35 years, Chiesi is committed to supporting the neonatology community and the NICU families you serve. To learn more, visit www.nicuconnections.com/incubator.
Beyond the Beeps is an incubator podcast done in partnership with ICU Baby. ICU Baby is the largest NICU support organization in the Southeast United States and provides comprehensive support to more than 300 NICU beds in the diverse metropolis of Miami. What happens in the NICU beyond the beeps? In this podcast, we pull back the curtain on the journey of NICU families and dive deeper into the NICU experience. Parents share their stories, their words of wisdom, and their hope. I am your host, Leah Gianetti, and I, along with my team of NICU mentors, hold the hands of hundreds of families each year who are living the NICU. I am bringing all of the families who I have met in the NICU with me to host this podcast and have these conversations so you can have a better NICU experience. We are so glad you're here. Welcome to Beyond the Beeps. When we think of a NICU, if we've ever even heard of that before, we usually think of really sick babies, little tiny babies, probably premature babies. But full-term babies go to the NICU also, really big babies. And these are babies whose parents probably never expected to be there at this point in their pregnancy. Joining me to share her story of unexpected and full-term NICU stay is Elizabeth Simonton. Elizabeth is a wonderful human. Prior to even having a NICU experience, she's the mother of 2 other children. She's a former attorney, a small business owner, a hustler, a shaker. And following her experience with her NICU baby, she created the NICU Family Fund, which went on to become ICU Baby, where I work. Beth also serves on the Florida Perinatal Quality Collaborative and the Executive Council of the Family Centered Care Task Force, and on the board of the NICU Parent Network, if that wasn't all enough. And as you can hear from her, this is only a snapshot of her life. She is incredibly dedicated to us, NICU families. But before all of this happened, as most stories do, they start with getting pregnant, having a pregnancy. Beth, welcome. Take us back to the pregnancy with Ben.
Well, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. All the work that you listed is really done with the pleasure of my heart. And yeah, like you said, so much of this comes from lived experience, right? We never know what path we're headed on. And my path to be involved in this world was really occasioned by the birth of my son, Benedict, who we call Ben. And he was my 3rd baby, my 3rd pregnancy. And unlike his sisters who preceded him, he gave me complications from the beginning. And he was giving me a hard time, although now he's the angel. So we found out pretty early on, around week 15, 16, that I had what they call polyhydramnios.
Mm-hmm.
So what this means is that there's too much amniotic fluid. A lot of times we hear about mothers who have too little amniotic fluid. Well, I was on the other side of that spectrum, and my belly just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think what was interesting about this pregnancy was they couldn't really tell me why. And sometimes with health conditions, when you don't know why, it makes you have this element of anxiety that is sometimes uncontrollable.
Yeah.
And so I'll admit, Leah, I went to Dr. Google a lot, right? To figure out, why do I have all this fluid?
Right.
And why didn't I have all this fluid with the girls?
Right.
And so as soon as you turn to Dr. Google, which they tell you not to, you kind of go down a rabbit hole, and that's not a rabbit hole any of us should really be going down.
Agreed.
And so I started to think the worst. The worst thing I read was the thing I believed was going to happen. And lo and behold, I did carry this sweet baby all the way to week 38.
Wow.
With all this fluid. And the reason why the doctors elected to deliver Benedict via C-section on week 38, it was a Saturday morning, May 17th, was because I had so much fluid, they were concerned if my water broke,
Oh,
the
wow.
rush of the fluid would be very dangerous for Benedict. And they made that very clear to me around week 30. So I was really living in a state of anxiety, to be honest,
Yeah.
while trying to care for my 2 and 3-year-olds at home. And so it was a lot of praying. It was a lot of hoping. It was a lot of trusting in the universe that everything was going to be okay.
Right.
But I had to go back and forth twice a week to a high risk doctor, twice a week, and then also to my OBGYN. And also I had the 2 other girls at home. So it was stressful. It was a very stressful pregnancy. And interestingly enough, I really never during that time thought about the NICU. I never thought, let's Google the NICU
Mm-hmm.
in case that's an option for us. And in hindsight, that seems really, if I was Googling everything else, why wouldn't I have Googled that? Right.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
And nobody presented it to you either, which is also interesting.
Isn't that interesting? And maybe they didn't feel like they needed to, but it was something that never crossed my mind, right? I just wanted, all I kept saying is, dear God, if you could please hand me another healthy baby, I would appreciate it. And I was really in prayer and just enjoying my girls at the time. Okay, so let's fast forward to May 17th. And this is, of course, when Ben's going to be delivered via C-section. My husband at the time and I were really quite scared because we thought, well, here's our answer. We're going to find out why this little one wasn't taking that amniotic fluid as he should have been. So there was some anticipation there that we hadn't had with the girls also. Well, Benedict was delivered and he was 9.5 pounds.
Ooh,
The day that I turned 38 weeks. I am a relatively small woman, so you can imagine with all the fluid and with that big turkey, how big my tummy really was, And so when Ben comes out, we wait for the cry. We hear the cry, and he is chubby and swollen and just round. He was perfect in every way. And just, we were so excited and his scores came out well. And it was just a wonderful experience. And by the time I came to after the C-section, I was told he's in the nursery, not in the NICU. He was in the nursery alongside me getting checked out. And I would say, 4 hours later, he was in my arms. He was not in an ICU.
Yeah.
It seemed really at the time, it seemed that our prayers had been answered.
You'd made it.
All that worrying.
Yeah.
And we made it.
Yeah.
And all that worrying for months, really, there was really a happy ending.
Yeah.
Clear.
Yeah. And then as babies tend to do, something changed, right? What do you remember about that moment when they came to you?
Well, I really remember thinking when I was holding him alone in the room, thinking, gosh, we did it. We made it. My prayers were answered. Really thought that. How lucky am I? I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude at the time.
Yeah.
And so what happened next, about 24 hours after he was delivered, I was in the room alone holding him. And the nurses had told me we were going to try to feed him a bottle because we want to make sure anatomically he's working properly, given the condition that you had prior to delivery.
Because you were planning to breastfeed, right? Just for clarification.
I was planning to breastfeed and I had been breastfeeding, but at the time it was colostrum.
Okay.
So they weren't able to tell whether or not he could take the full amount of a flow, right? It was just tiny bits of my colostrum that he was receiving. And so they wanted to just check while he was still there if he could take this. And so I wasn't thrilled about it, but of course was following what the healthcare team told me to do. And so tried to give him a little bit of formula and he asphyxiated and turned blue in my arms. And within a matter of, 5 seconds, I pushed the button, the nurse came in and Ben was gone. Ben was gone. And it's been 9 years and I'm telling you this now and my hair stands up because I was blown. And first I had the baby, and here I am in gratitude. Everything's great. And what we know is that things change so quickly, right? And so that was my experience. And then I just sat in that room staring at the wall, wondering what the heck just happened. um, and not really knowing, I wasn't crying. I was just feeling in shock at the time.
Shock makes sense. That's a shocking experience. And possibly you had maybe given yourself a little bit of room to relax a little bit, and then it all got turned back up again. Your emotional system just got revved right back up because now something's wrong again.
I would say it was even probably heightened, honestly, Leah, because it was worst case scenario,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And when they turn blue and they go out, you just don't know where they're going, what happened.
Right.
So it was, my emotions were on high alarm.
Yeah. What were they, when somebody came to you before you were able to go to see him, what was what they told you? What had brought Ben actually to the NICU? What was going on?
So at the time they didn't know. And they said that, obviously he wasn't able to take the formula, which is why they tested him, which is why I was, again, grateful that they tried while we were in the hospital and not at home.
Right.
Why I'm glad I listened to them. And they didn't know, but they knew they needed to take him to the NICU to do some extra testing to find out what exactly had gone wrong, what it was. And at that time, I was then hyper aware of what's the NICU. Well, the interesting thing about my story is I have a younger brother, 18 months younger, who was born very, very early at 26 weeks in 1981. So the NICU was, interestingly enough, not foreign to my life at all. Although at that time I was 1.5, right? So that was, I don't even really know about that. But I did know that he had been very sick. I knew he'd been there for a very, very long time. And beyond that, I didn't really have any friends that had had babies in the NICU even at the time. So the doctors really didn't know, but they said they were going to keep him there. And would I like to go see him?
Okay.
I was able to. I know some moms can't, right?
Right. Yeah.
Able to, because it had been 24 hours after delivery. So they were going to put me in a wheelchair and wheel me over to see Ben. So no real answers, but more, he's safe.
Yeah.
He's safe.
Okay. And so that time they invite you to go over, that's great that they were going to help motivate, like get you there. What was that experience like?
So this is the part that I feel so strongly about sharing, because I think it's something we don't talk about a lot, which is I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
That's wow. What mother wouldn't want to go see her baby who just had this experience? It's, me. And interestingly enough, my mom, when she had my brother, she later told me.
Yeah.
And so that shows you that how common it is to have that feeling. And why didn't I want to go? Well, at the time, I felt like my emotions couldn't handle worst case scenario.
Yeah.
My emotions were on a thread. I couldn't imagine going and seeing him so sick after that was my biggest fear now come to life.
Right.
Now it came true. All those Dr. Googles were coming true. We didn't know what was wrong. Now he's in the NICU. And I had just delivered and my hormones were wild. And so my husband took me on a ride. We went into the NICU, into the wheelchair, and we walked a little bit around the hospital to calm me down, right? And to breathe a little bit, to think about, to manage expectations. What would it be like walking through those doors of the NICU? And he told me a little, he's a physician in training. So he told me a little bit what I was going to see and prepared me. This is what you can expect when we walk through there. And after about an hour or two, can you imagine? I said, look, I was ready, but that was after many, many, many tears, fear. How is it going to be seeing my little one with wires on him and needles when I just saw him in my arms, so chubby and healthy and round? What was going on? And what if something happened? And what if he didn't make it? And all those fears that I had pent up for those months rushed over me. And it was a huge barrier to me walking through those doors. And lo and behold, we find out it is a huge barrier to many mothers, the emotional component of seeing your newborn baby in the NICU. It's a lot.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you bring this up because you're right. And I think it's probably more of us than less of us who are afraid to go and see this in actuality, or are afraid to feel what might be happening. We have some parents who have traumatic deliveries or had, a really tough pregnancy, and just walking across the threshold of the door of the hospital can be activating and triggering. Just walking down the hall, smelling the soap, all of these things are huge barriers to being there. And I know we've had a lot of families that we've supported who feel just overwhelmed to be at the bedside if they can get there, right? So I think you're right. I think there's a lot more of us than less that experience this.
It's interesting, isn't it? And with me, I was bringing also kind of a treasure chest of past trauma. Also, my middle daughter had been very, very sick prior. She had meningitis, and I remember, so I kind of knew what intensive care looked like for a baby, and I knew it was hard, and it was time and a lot of needles and a lot of work. And so I was bringing that with me also. So we also, when we cross that threshold into the NICU, we're bringing our past lived experiences with us. And that looks very different for everyone. Maybe it's not another child that was sick, but maybe it was a parent that was sick, or maybe you had been sick in your past, or you had a traumatic delivery. When we walk across the threshold of the NICU as parents, we're bringing things with us also. So important to remember.
Yeah, that's a wonderful parent pearl for sure. Hang on to that one.
Yeah.
In life. So when you finally made it there after that hour and a half of settling your nervous system, which I'm so glad that you took the time to care for you, right? We talk about, what do you need to be able to show up for your baby? Because even though you felt that, you knew you were going to overcome it somehow, and you tended to yourself. It may not have felt comfortable. It may not have felt typical or normal, but you tended to yourself so that you could show up in the way you wanted to. And that is incredible courage and love. It's to overcome that amount of fear that's a will beyond others.
I think that as a mother, you listen to you, and I appreciate that you say that it's courage. Because I would say, gosh, I was not courageous at all. If I was courageous, I would have gone right in there. So the fact that you classify it as being courageous is really quite lovely. And I think we have to remember that as moms, because let me tell you something, when I walked through those doors and I saw Ben, I was a different person. I was ready.
Mm-hmm.
I was ready for what I was going to endure, to see. And I knew walking in there, okay, I've got it together. I'm ready for what it's going to handle. So I think I never thought of it like this, but I guess it was quite important that I took that pause to mentally say, am I ready? Am I strong enough? And when I felt like I was sort of ready, you're really ever ready for it.
Ever ready.
You cross that line and you go. And when I saw Ben, he was gigantic in the isolette. That was my first thought. And he was in a space of the hospital where there were multiple isolettes next to each other. So we did not have a private room. When Ben was admitted to the NICU, they had a very high census, actually. So the private rooms were all taken, and they had even moved some of the babies into another area of the hospital. So we were next to other little ones. And when I say little ones, and Ben was 9.5 pounds.
Wow.
So he just filled that isolette with all his splendor. Yeah.
Amazing. So, yeah, he was the mayor. So when you saw him, give us a little picture. You're doing an amazing job of giving us a glimpse into your life. What did Ben require at that point? Did he have, we know babies have a lot of, IVs and lines, or they're getting fed in different ways. What was the biggest thing Ben was facing at that point?
So he did have the IVs. He had the lines. He was breathing on his own, which is really a wonderful thing. I can't take that for granted. But he wasn't able to eat at the time, right? So they were feeding him differently than me breastfeeding. And I think as a breastfeeding mother of 2 past children, this was tough on me emotionally also. My body was telling me primitively, hormonally, you need to breastfeed this child.
Yeah.
And I wasn't able to. So seeing him like that, I think there's just such a difference between having a baby in the NICU and having one in your arms shortly after birth, hormonally, primitively. And so it was hard to see him like that. I just wanted to scoop him out of there, and hold him, put him against my chest, to hold. And interestingly enough, for the first 24 hours Ben was there, I was able to hold him in the NICU. I was able to hold him with all the lines connected, but I was able to hold him. And so while it was still a very different experience, I could touch him, feel him,
Yes.
have him feel me. And that was really powerful. And then, that changed later when they realized that his bilirubin levels were going down. But for that moment of time, I was still very, very sad and scared. But being able to hold him in the NICU, I realized was really quite a luxury at that time. So I was so appreciative.
Yeah, because most, as we know in the NICU, and most times there is a separation of holding. You can't hold your baby for a while. So then his bilirubin levels went up, which they can do even if you're a full-term baby, and as Ben did. And what did they need to do for him then? You weren't able to hold him anymore, I guess.
So this is where, I know it impacts a lot of babies, but they had to put the blue light on him. And my level, by the way, of NICU health literacy is very low. I didn't know what that was for, why they were doing it. The girls who were born 2 and 3 years before did not have this. So I had a lot of questions. And what that meant to me as a mother was, you cannot hold him. And he needs this light to help him. And also, they put on what I called a blindfold over his eyes. And Leah, when I tell you, that bothered me so much. I don't know why, and that I couldn't see these big eyes looking at me and interacting and seeing me as a mother. And it bothered me. And it also, so it was like they had really encapsulated my baby. I couldn't hold him. I couldn't see him. He couldn't see me. And all those things kind of took away my feelings of being a mother.
Yep.
Right? Because those things that I couldn't feed, I couldn't hold, and he couldn't look at me. He could hear me. I was able to open the windows and hold his hand. But again, compared to the experiences I had with my other girls, this was a big difference for me. And I think that difference escalated the emotional response that I had.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. All the things that were soothing to you, right? The things that were like helping, validating that experience that you were having, and then also soothing you and, giving you the comfort that we need as parents. It's not just, we talk about touch. The babies need touch, but we do too. Holding our baby on our skin is healing for us also. You shared with me that you said, oh my gosh, I forgot. Ben was on antibiotics and that was really hard for me. Tell me more about that.
Yes, when he got into the NICU, they said they were going to put him on antibiotics. And I had the 2 girls, and that was my experience as being a mother, was of toddlers. And I remember saying to the doctors, but why would you do that? Because the pediatrician had taught me we don't do antibiotics until we know what it is. So for me, it was so counterintuitive as to why we would be putting my newborn baby on antibiotics when we had no idea what was wrong with him. And I really struggled with that. Why are we pumping this stuff into Ben when we don't know? And that's when the nurses did their wonderful job of explaining that he was so small and that we had to stay ahead of whatever it could be. And if we didn't stay ahead of the potential infection, it could actually be a very, very, very challenging course that he would take. And when she said that, this is the way we proceed in a NICU, it gave me so much solace. All you want to do as a parent is protect your child. And this was the way they felt they could protect him from the unknown, and really be conservative in the way they were treating him so that he couldn't go on to develop something that was more serious. And so when they started the antibiotics, I struggled. And then those words gave me the peace I needed to say, yes, let's go forward with this course as you're recommending.
Mm-hmm.
And I've since learned how really critical starting antibiotics early is for babies, not missing that window to get something going, because his cultures could have came back
Yeah.
positive for a bacteria, I guess. And what I knew is that we wanted to stay in front of that. Well, the good news was, and the reason why we were only there for 6 days was because the cultures came back negative. But I think one question we get a lot is, how do you know those antibiotics didn't adversely impact him?
Yeah. I mean, it's not surprising that even without being a parent before, right? In our world, you see on the news, you say, oh my gosh, there's antibiotics in our meat. There's antibiotics in our chicken. We are overloaded. We're going to become completely resistant to these antibiotics. It's somebody knows somebody who's had an infection that they couldn't resolve of skin as an adult, right? And and you mentioned in our previous interview about not putting a parent perspective on it, or not putting an adult perspective would be what we're doing in this. And that's really hard in the NICU because none of us have experience in the NICU. And so we think, gosh, this must apply, right? They're just tiny humans, but they're not, and they need a different approach. And we've talked about antibiotics a lot because most babies in the NICU end up having antibiotics at some point, if it's for something like Ben, like to get ahead of an infection that might be brewing that would cause them to have a more serious reaction, or with other folks that we speak to because they have an infection in their stomach, or they were born exposed to group B strep, which if anybody who's given birth, you get tested for that. And if you come out positive, they're going to test that baby and they're going to give you antibiotics because they want to make sure, like they said to you, that they stay ahead. But it's so hard to wrap our heads around because then we think, oh my God, here we go. The gut's exposed. It's not it's just going to be forever. And I know our amazing folks at the incubator have just released some really interesting information about the study that's been done about the probiotics and whether or not to give them in the NICU and how harmful or helpful they're being. So if that's an interest of you, I would absolutely send you over to their website and listen to their podcast about that, because the information is what we need. It's, like you said, it was the information that gave you the comfort. It was knowing that somebody could explain it and give you causality or a response that helped you to say, okay, I can be comfortable. I can be comfortable with that because it's important to be comfortable. We know that from our, and the nurses and doctors tell us that they want you to be comfortable at bedside. And if you're uncertain and you're having a lot of questions, you're not comfortable. And that's not great for anybody.
Isn't that true? And it also shows that so much of what we learn outside of the NICU, whether it's through the media, like you said, or whether it's through past experiences with our other children or ourselves, the NICU is so specialized. The people that work there they know these babies so well. They know the protocol. But I was taking that lived experience,
Sure.
that what I had heard, what I had before, and thinking I knew better, right? I wait a second, what are you going to do? Why would you do that? And I think that's where the humility comes into in the NICU, and and recognizing that things are different when you're dealing with babies that are so small and so fragile. Even Big Ben at 9.5 pounds, he was there for a reason.
Right.
And having the humility to really listen and step back and trust the experts. Sometimes it's disarming as parents who, to do that, but it's true. I was really taking my own lens and thinking, I knew better. I am the mother. It's my child.
Mm-hmm.
And leaving that on the shelf is sometimes very hard for us and very emotional for us also.
Yeah.
And the antibiotic component was a big one for me. But thankfully, I had an incredible team of nurses and doctors that did a great job telling me and recognizing my concerns and communicating with me in a way that I could understand, knowing that I have no medical background. How important this was allowed me to make that informed decision. And they did allow me to have that conversation. They did invite me to ask the questions. They did say what additional information we could provide. And that made me feel empowered as a mother, whereas it wasn't what I would have recommended. But what did I know after all? To the contrary, while I couldn't make the decision, I could have the information that would help me understand why the decision was being made.
Sure.
And that was empowering as a parent,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah. And we didn't talk about how was he receiving those antibiotics, right? When you were in the NICU, how did he get that?
Right. Through IV.
Okay. And where did he have his IV?
So his IVs kept changing. They kept having to move the location of the IV, ultimately ending up in the head,
right?
Which is hard to see as a parent also. And every time they would poke Ben, it was like tearing my heart out.
Yeah.
It hurt. I could feel the pain. We were still so connected. He had just been inside of my stomach. And, it bothered me to see him poked so many times. I couldn't find the vein that would pop out. He was a big baby, strong guy, would pull it out. It was, but I knew he needed it.
Yeah.
And just watching him, I had the luxury, Leah, of being at the bedside for 12 hours a day. And that's hard to witness for 12 hours a day.
It is.
In hindsight, I wish I had taken more breaks. I wish I had stepped outside a little bit more to have a break from seeing your baby with these lines is really important for us to remember.
Yeah, there's a lot of sensory stuff going on, a lot of noises, beeps, about other people's babies going through those emotions. I mean, that's a whole different conversation, is witnessing what you see in the NICU that's not even your own baby. Yeah, I think one of the really important things about the line in the head is, and I've talked with many, many mothers about it, is it's shocking to see a needle in your baby's head. And I've had, parents say, it's in his brain, and panicking, like, oh my gosh. And then, like you said, the education was like, we're going to put it here. And if you're someone out there who's worried about that, the biggest thing that I like to remember is babies can't reach the top of their head. So that's why it's really great to have that line up there, because they're just proportionately made so their hands can't touch the top of their heads. So it's the only safe spot, especially if you have those big babies or the super feisty ones, which we want in the NICU. We want them to be, little spitfires. But when they put it in the head, it's frightening, but it's really good because they can't reach it to pull it out.
Can't yank it out.
That's the benefit of the big head.
Well, and Ben, he was destined, to be a big guy and fight, and he didn't love it, but it worked, and it was, and having a healthcare team that took the time to explain it to me compassionately, not at all in judgment. What does she know? She has 2 girls, so she's all of a sudden an expert about when to give antibiotics, which I probably thought at the time I was, because I was mother bear protecting my baby.
Of course.
To the contrary, it was, we understand how you're feeling.
Right.
It's very approachable. We understand why you would think that.
Right.
Right. But this is how it's done in the protocol in the NICU because of, and that explanation is gold for parents. Yeah. Because then they feel informed. They feel like they understand. Even you explaining the needle in the head to a layman like me, it's really an important communication is really king in the NICU, and it allows parents' nerves to relax. They're already so heightened, but it lowers that. They feel like, okay, I know what's happening now. Yeah. And I can share with all those friends who keep texting me. Now I know what's happening. And having information is so powerful. Knowing that information may change, and also knowing, I remember day 1 and day 2, it was just, we don't know yet. And that was enough information for me. Right. It was enough information for me to say we're still running tests. Yeah. I didn't need the answer. I just need to know that the answer was coming at some point.
Oh my goodness. So how was that experience for you to have that separation? How did you find ways to cope? Because you made it through that time. What were things that helped you? Was it people telling you something, or did you change anything to help make it through that time?
So I think one of the best things that one of the nurses said to me, because I said, you've blindfolded him. Yeah. And they said, they're just sunglasses. And that I immediately in my head, if of course they are, that we're protecting his eyes from the sun, from the bright blue lights that are on him. And they looked like sunglasses, to be honest with you. So when that was said, it changed my mental structure of processing what was happening. Right. And I think the other thing, and I mince no words about this, is that everyone's NICU experience is so much, whether it's a day, 2 days, 3 days, 6 days. It is a lot to see your child sick for even an hour. Let's be honest. But having preemies, tiny babies around me at that time and seeing some of the things that they were going through in the room where there were other babies, it gave me, and being with the mothers also, the sense of community and being with those mothers gave me strength. It showed me, well, gosh, Beth, if they can get through that, you can get through this, right? And we don't want to compare trauma. That's so passe. We don't. But what you can do is derive strength from other people that are going through hard times.
Mm-hmm.
And I very much did that, whether it was just eye contact or, celebrating the baby that got to go home in the far corner when he passed the car seat test, and just thinking, gosh, if that's them, that's going to be me. So I think deriving strength from other people in similar situations, and not comparing, but really just knowing that if they could do it, I could too.
Yeah.
Of course I could.
Yeah.
Leaning into a partner is also helpful if you have one. And partners look very different. At the time, it was my husband, but I also leaned into my friends for support.
Yep.
I also tried to, I think most people don't realize that big babies, full-term babies, can go to the NICU. So one thing that I would want to share about having a full-term baby is you get a lot of messages from friends that don't understand why your child is in the NICU when
Right.
they were born at 38 weeks. What the heck could be wrong?
Right.
We don't know. I didn't know. And the way I protected myself from the messages that kept coming, which were emotionally triggering also, to be honest,
Sure.
was I just stopped answering. I just wanted to protect myself, my family, my baby. I
Mm-hmm.
stopped answering those messages and asked friends, close friends, just to share. We weren't sure what was happening because for so long we really didn't know what was going on. We weren't sure what was happening, but that we would share when we knew.
Right.
And not having to be your own PR representative, your own spokesperson to a very broad community,
Right.
is helpful.
Right.
For some.
Yes. Yes.
For some.
Yes. And well-meaning family and friends can be what they're saying, and they mean well, again, but what they can say can really feel bad sometimes. And it's just because they don't know, or they're trying to make you feel better so they can feel better. But that can be really challenging. I love that idea of having, designating a close friend who you can, have them streamline and speak up for you, and just talk to one person that will respect your boundaries and respect your space and can help keep those people at bay, especially if you have a big family or big group of friends who are loving and caring. They have time in the future to be there. They have time in the future. Saying no is a complete sentence.
I love that expression.
Yeah.
And it's very true.
Yeah.
Especially when you're in a situation as a NICU parent where you don't know a lot of things, right? And a lot of times as a NICU parent, we don't know. Doctors don't know the answers right away.
Right.
And things change day to day, right? So updates are only as good as they are that hour sometimes in the NICU. And so recognizing, like you said so beautifully, that most, if not all, of the intentions from friends and family are great. They just care, and they're caring in their own way. But recognizing you can turn the volume down when you need to is really important. That's that self-preservation that you were talking about earlier.
Yes. Turn the volume down. I like that. Okay. So Ben, how long did he end up staying in the NICU?
Ben was there for 6 days.
Okay.
Which is just incredible given now how much I devote to supporting NICU families.
Yeah.
It was a relatively short stay, but it was all I could handle at the time.
Yeah.
We're given what we can handle. And that was really quite debilitating for me because of recognizing he was my third child and I had two other babies at home, and doing that dance was
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned in the beginning about hope in the pregnancy, hope in the delivery, and you sort of mention it here and there. It's something that we at ICU Baby uphold hope in our work, and we try to lay hope as the foundation in the NICU. What does hope mean to you? What could it have meant to you in the NICU?
I think with regard to Ben's condition, situation, unexpected admission to the NICU, hope to me really meant not giving up on him, on myself, both. Knowing that he wasn't in such a spectacular care in those in the healthcare teams he was with, and really trusting that the outcome would be what it should, and recognizing that I couldn't control the situation. And that was hard for someone like me, not to be able
Yeah.
to exercise control over outcomes, or get him out when I wanted to get him out, or manage this new baby the way I had with my girls.
Yeah.
So hope to me was always knowing that things were going to turn out as they should.
Acceptance.
Very good, Leah. Thank you. With one word, it was acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know.
We don't. Yeah. Okay. And tell me about Ben now.
He's adorable.
Mm-hmm. I've seen him. He is. I can corroborate this. He is adorable.
So the interesting thing about Ben is Ben has been the healthiest child I've had. The girls have had more health complications, very honestly, than Ben has.
Mm-hmm.
And, really what they found was Ben was overdeveloped externally and underdeveloped internally. And that's really what caused the problems he was having in the asphyxiation. So the first 3 months of him being home after discharge involved a lot of throw up, a lot of vomiting, because he was still throwing up that milk as he had, which landed him in the NICU. The difference was now I knew how to handle it. Now the doctors knew what was going on. They taught me how to handle it. Those 6 days allowed him to develop a little more so he could handle a bottle. I wasn't able to breastfeed, but I was able to pump and give a bottle.
Great.
And so he received breast milk, which again, that was a little bit of a disappointment. I was looking forward to putting Ben to the breast, but it wasn't in the cards. And so I pumped religiously and I gave him his milk in a bottle. And he still, to this day, if he eats and then laughs at 9 years old, he gets really bad reflux and hiccups. He just does. He was born this way. And it was, but he is as healthy as an ox. And we now just kind of laugh at him when I'll say when he's eating dinner, don't laugh so hard, you're going to vomit again. Which is exactly why he was there to begin with, right? He just was underdeveloped. That part of his body anatomically isn't as strong as the rest of my big boy. And that's really been his condition all along. And we own it now. It's part of who he is.
And he's about to turn 10. Yeah, along with ICU Baby. And he's in 3rd grade, 4th grade. Oh my goodness. Okay. And he's an excellent sportsman, playing lots of sports, loving life. Beautiful.
He also, Leah, he has a compassion for others that I believe began when he was in the NICU, because what I told my girls when I didn't bring home the baby that was in my belly, as they thought I would.
Yeah.
Not to worry, girls. Remember, they were 2 and 3 years old. So not to worry, girls. He's with his friends in the NICU. There's a bunch of babies there that are with him. He's not alone. He has other friends there, just like you have friends in your class. And of course, you say this through tears, right? You're holding it back. But what solace that gives 2 and 3-year-olds, knowing, because all they know is their little preschool class. So
Right.
They don't know any difference. I didn't put the parent lens on my children. I tried to take the child perspective and convey the story of why their little brother wasn't home through their eyes. And that was so helpful.
That's brilliant.
They tease it.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so you've shared just incredible honesty and beautiful pearls of wisdom. But is there anything you would want to leave someone with today? Any words of wisdom for someone who's sitting by their bedside today?
I think you every day wake up and recognize there are going to be days that are great. And there are going to be days that are very difficult. And that could be with a long-term NICU stay and a short-term NICU stay. And my advice is just try your best. And your best looks different every day. It really does. And if your best is taking a walk in the morning rather than racing into the NICU, take that walk, because a healthy mom, healthy dad, healthy parent is so important to sustain what is a marathon of the NICU. So putting undue pressure on ourselves in a very stressful environment, stressful time, is doing ourselves a disservice. We need to be gentle with ourselves. We need to be graceful with ourselves. And I think that's what I would offer NICU parents.
Beautiful. And if you can't do it the first time, try again the next day. Being graceful with yourself. Like you said, it's different every day.
Different every day. And sometimes, let's be honest, you can make it till 12 o'clock and then your grace is out the door.
Yes.
And then other times you think you've made it. This is a lesson in parenting, really. And those lessons apply everywhere. But all we can do is really our best. And that does look different. That's a really important point, Leah.
Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here today and sharing your experience with us, and then going on and being able to amplify what is ICU Baby and amplify and spread it to more and more and more families. And just thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me and for letting me share my story of Ben. It was a beautiful conversation. Thank you so much.
For sure. And if you're on your way to visit your baby in the hospital, or you're sitting at your baby's bedside, or perhaps you're up in the middle of the night pumping, or vigilantly watching the baby's camera and awake, as we tend to be as parents, Elizabeth and I want you to know that you are not alone. And we look forward to sitting with you again soon. Take gentle care. A NICU Parent Pearl. Something we know for sure. Every baby and every NICU journey is different. The story you heard today is this family's story. We hope what you learn here will empower you to ask questions and engage with your baby's healthcare team throughout your NICU journey and beyond. As a reminder, this podcast is intended to be purely for entertainment and informational purposes, and should not be construed as medical advice. If you have any medical concerns for yourself or your baby, please talk to a medical professional. You all deserve to feel well. Thank you for listening to Beyond the Beeps. If you liked this episode, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast or the Apple Podcast website. You can find other episodes of this show and other incubator shows wherever you prefer to listen to podcasts. We would love to hear from you, so feel free to send us questions, comments, or suggestions to our email address, director@icubaby.org. You can also message the show on Instagram, Twitter, or through our website at icubaby.org. Thank you.